Welcome to Dialogue Doodles, where we explore timeless wisdom that shapes our world. I'm your host, Jack. Imagine someone so committed to truth that they'd choose death over compromising their principles. Now, what if I told you this same person never wrote a single book, yet became one of history's most influential thinkers? Today, we're joined by James Anderson, a philosopher and expert in classical thought. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jack. It's great to be here, especially to discuss someone who's fascinated me throughout my entire career.
We're talking about Socrates, a man who revolutionized thinking itself. James, let's start with something intriguing. How did someone who never wrote anything down become such a cornerstone of Western philosophy?
That's actually one of the most fascinating aspects of Socrates' legacy. Everything we know about him comes through his students, particularly Plato. But what's remarkable is how his method of questioning, not his written words, became his most powerful contribution.
Could you paint us a picture of who Socrates was? I understand he wasn't your typical philosopher in an ivory tower.
Far from it. Born in 469 BCE to middle-class parents in Athens, Socrates was both a philosopher and a soldier. He served in the military with distinction, but it was his role as what he called a Gadfly of Athens that really defined him.
A gadfly? That's an interesting term to describe oneself.
Yes, he saw himself as someone who kept Athens awake and alert by asking uncomfortable but necessary questions. Much like a gadfly keeps a horse from becoming lazy by stinging it.
You mentioned that Socrates was known for his method of questioning. What made his approach so revolutionary?
Think of Socrates as a personal trainer for the mind. Just as a trainer pushes you to physical discomfort for growth, Socrates pushed people to intellectual discomfort for wisdom. He had this unique way of asking probing questions that would expose gaps in people's thinking.
That's a fascinating analogy. Could you give us an example of how this worked in practice?
Well, imagine someone claimed to know what justice is. Instead of directly challenging them, Socrates would ask seemingly simple questions. Is it just to always tell the truth? Then he'd present scenarios where telling the truth might cause harm, leading people to question their own assumptions.
I understand this method is still used today, particularly in law schools.
Exactly. Law schools use the Socratic method to teach critical thinking. Professors ask students challenging questions about cases, forcing them to defend their positions and consider multiple perspectives. But it goes beyond law. You'll find similar approaches in modern psychotherapy, business consulting, and even Silicon Valley.
Speaking of Silicon Valley, how does ancient Socratic wisdom apply in our tech-driven world?
It's quite remarkable actually. Design thinking, which is hugely popular in tech companies, shares many principles with the Socratic method. Both emphasize questioning assumptions, understanding user needs through deep inquiry, and not jumping to conclusions.
What would Socrates think about our modern social media debates?
Oh, he'd probably be both fascinated and horrified. Fascinated by the potential for global dialogue, but horrified by how we often talk past each other rather than engaging in genuine inquiry. His famous quote, "The unexamined life is not worth living," seems particularly relevant in our age of hot takes and instant reactions.
That quote came from his trial, didn't it? Where he ultimately chose death over compromising his principles.
Yes, and it's perhaps the most powerful demonstration of his commitment to truth. When given the choice between abandoning his philosophical mission or facing death, he chose death, believing that living without the freedom to question and seek wisdom wasn't really living at all.
It's interesting to consider, would many people today make the same choice? Stand by their principles even at the ultimate cost?
That's a profound question, Jack. In our era of relative comfort and convenience, it's easy to avoid taking strong stands. But Socrates showed that some principles are worth more than life itself. Though I think his real lesson wasn't about martyrdom, but about living authentically and questioning deeply.
James, let's dig deeper into how we can actually apply Socratic wisdom in our daily lives. What practical lessons can we draw from his approach?
The first and perhaps most important lesson is about intellectual humility. The oracle at Delphi declared Socrates the wisest man in Athens, and he concluded this was because he alone knew that he knew nothing. In today's world of instant experts and social media gurus, this humility is more valuable than ever.
That's quite counterintuitive. Wisdom coming from acknowledging ignorance rather than proclaiming knowledge.
Exactly. And this leads to the second practical lesson: asking better questions. Instead of rushing to provide answers, Socrates would probe deeper with questions. Imagine applying this in a business meeting or family discussion, asking genuine, exploratory questions rather than jumping to conclusions.
Could you give us an example of how someone might do that?
Sure. Let's say you are in a team meeting and someone proposes a solution to a problem. Instead of immediately agreeing or disagreeing, you might ask, what assumptions are we making here, or how might this affect different stakeholders? These questions help uncover blind spots and lead to better decisions.
I can see how this could transform conversations, but isn't there a risk of coming across as challenging or confrontational?
That's a crucial point. Socrates himself was sometimes seen as irritating, hence the Gadfly nickname. The key is to question with genuine curiosity and good faith, not to prove others wrong. It's about shared exploration rather than interrogation.
Speaking of modern application, I'm curious about your thoughts on how Socratic thinking might apply to artificial intelligence and machine learning.
That's fascinating territory. I think Socrates would be particularly concerned about our tendency to defer to AI without questioning its underlying assumptions. He'd probably remind us that even the most sophisticated AI is only as good as the questions we ask it and the data we feed it.
It sounds like we need Socratic thinking now more than ever.
Absolutely. In an age of information overload, fake news, and echo chambers, the ability to question critically and think clearly is crucial. Socrates taught us that real understanding comes through dialogue and questioning, not just consuming information.
As we wrap up, what would be your key takeaway for our listeners? How can they start applying these principles today?
I'd encourage everyone to practice what I call the Socratic pause before accepting any claim or making any decision. Pause and ask yourself, what am I assuming here? What might I be missing? What would happen if I'm wrong? These simple questions can lead to profound insights.
That's wonderful advice. It reminds me of what you said earlier about the unexamined life. It's not about becoming professional philosophers, but about bringing more thoughtfulness to our daily decisions.
Exactly. Socrates showed us that philosophy isn't just for academics, it's a practical tool for living a better, more examined life. And in today's complex world, that's something we all need.
Thank you, James, for this fascinating discussion. To our listeners, remember, the next time you're faced with a challenging situation, take that Socratic pause and see where it leads you.
Thank you, Jack. It's been a pleasure exploring these timeless ideas with you.
Before we end today's show, I'd like to explore one final thought. James, what would Socrates make of our modern pursuit of happiness and success?
You know, I think he'd challenge our definitions of both. Socrates believed true happiness comes not from external achievements, but from internal alignment, living according to our examined principles.
That's quite different from today's self-help messaging, isn't it?
Completely different. While modern self-help often focuses on quick fixes and life hacks, Socrates would argue that real personal growth comes from continuous self-examination and the courage to question our own beliefs.
It strikes me that there's something both challenging and liberating in that message.
Absolutely. Challenging because it requires constant effort and honesty with ourselves. Liberating because it frees us from the tyranny of unexamined assumptions and societal expectations.
One last question. If Socrates were alive today, what single piece of advice do you think he'd give our listeners?
I believe he'd say, don't outsource your thinking. Whether it's to social media, AI, experts, or even philosophers like himself, always maintain your capacity for critical thought and questioning.
That's powerful advice in an age where we're often tempted to let others do our thinking for us.
And remember, Socrates never claimed to have all the answers. His genius was in helping others find their own path to understanding through thoughtful questioning.
On that note, I'd like to thank our guest, James Anderson, for this fascinating exploration of Socratic wisdom and its modern applications. To our listeners, remember, the unexamined life might be easier, but it's the examined one that's truly worth living.
Thank you, Jack. And to everyone listening, I hope you'll take some time today to ask yourself those important questions that you might have been avoiding. That's where real wisdom begins.
This has been Thinking Forward. I'm Jack Thompson, reminding you that some of our best answers come from asking better questions. Until next time, keep thinking, keep questioning, and keep moving forward.